Conceptual Analysis of Rule Following Behavior by Joseph Wardrich. Outline. Rule following according to Skinner. Concept of rule following behavior. Rule governed behavior. Relational training and transformation of stimulus functions of antecedents. A rule can be understood without being fouled. Self-rules, rule-governed behavior, and problem-solving. Outline continued. We'll talk about functional units of rule following, including pillants, tracking, and augmenting. We'll also talk about analyzing the independent unit, and then dimensions of rules and their related behavior, which are explicitness of the rule, accuracy of the rule, complexity of the rule, and sources of the rule. Skinner alludes to autoclitic frame in his book Verbal Behavior, which he wrote in 1957, in which he says, when we bring a naive subject into the laboratory and present pairings of the sound of the bell and shock, it may take some time to learn the connection, as we say. We can shortcut most or all of this by simply telling him, whenever you hear the bell, you will receive a shock. The greater speed must be attributed to the difference between the cases, and this difference is simply the autoclitic frame. When you hear blank, you will receive a blank. This is effective because many similar patterns have been conditioned upon past occasions. The effect upon the listener may properly be called instruction. Now, the concept of rule-governed behavior, according to Tornecki 2010, based on functional analysis, behavior is understood and influenced by analyzing contextual factors, what precede antecedent, and what follows upon the consequence of that behavior. Early in life, humans learn a generalized operant, arbitrarily applicable relational responding. This responding is governed by contextual cues that specify the relationship so that the relational response can be brought to bear on any stimuli regardless of their formal physical properties. Relational framing and the transformation of stimulus functions of antecedents, again by Tornecki, 2010. For an antecedent to function as a rule, a certain skill is necessary of the listener. So being able to relate stimuli in coordination so that the different parts of the rule, the sounds in the words, stand for something. For example, if you were to see on a fence, beware of fierce dog. So the words here are put into relation of coordination with fierce dog. If this rule, if it's meaningful and understandable, it's also necessary for the listener to relate stimuli temporally and casually to establish the relation. So, going in there, if you're going to go into that fence, it's in a temporal and casual relationship with the consequence. It might be attacked. Next, we have that a rule can be understood without being fouled. Several factors influence whether a rule is fouled or not. So the first would be, obviously, the speaker's credibility. So this would be then in terms of the listener's perspective of that speaker. Contingencies of reinforcement for rule-governed behavior are missing. And the last one would be the rule is incoherent or contradictory in relation to the listener's learning history. So the example down there, if we were to read somewhere something that said, stay as sedimentary as you can, smoke at least 22 cigarettes a day, and regularly use large amounts of alcohol, and you will increase your chances of a long life and good health. So if we were to read that somewhere, hopefully we would look at that and think, yeah, that doesn't sound right. All right, everyone, get excited because now we're going to talk about some self rules. So the self rules are rules that are directed towards oneself and they influence our own actions. So, for example, if a child learns rule governed behavior, the process starts with rules provided by others. So maybe the child hears, their guardian saying to them, "Mary, eat your food." So after the starting basic ability of relational framing, that's coordination, is in place, the echoic behavior of the child, "Mary, eat food," can be transformed to "I eat food." Next is rule governed behavior and problem solving. So Skinner, in his book Verbal Behavior, defines problem solving as behavior which, through the manipulation of variables, makes the appearance of a solution more possible. So humans can abstract formal characteristics of events that they are faced with and then relate them to each other in a way that is needed, circumscribed by these characteristics themselves. Functional units of rule following. This is from Hayes, written in 1989. There's at least 3 distinct types of rule-governed behavior which are organized by the contingencies that motivate action with regards to the rule. Those 3 that we're going to talk about are pillins, tracking, and augmenting. Pillins. This is it's the most fundamental unit of rule-governed behavior. It comes from the word compliance. Under control of apparent socially mediated consequences for a correspondence between the rule and relevant behavior. It involves consequences for rule governing per se, mediated by the verbal community. When a rule functions this way, it's said to function as apply. The second functional unit of rule following, according to Hayes, is tracking. So that suggests following a path. Rule-governed behavior is under the control of the apparent correspondence between the rule and the way the word is arranged. So, for example, if I were to tell you the way to get to Reno is to follow I-80, if you, as the listener, your behavior is brought under control of the rule because of apparent correspondence between it and how actually to get to Reno, then that's considered tracking. The third functional unit is augmenting, according to Hayes. Here, this suggests a change or heightened state of affairs. It's under the control of apparent changes in the capacity of events to function as reinforcers or as punishers. Augmenting is among the most subtle but the most important forms of rule-governed behavior. It rarely exists in pure form. It usually is mixed with pillins or tracking, which are the first 2 units of rule-governed behavior that we just talked about. So it's never alone, usually. It's with others. Analyzing the interdependent unit, Pelias et al., 1999. There's a codependent relationship that's between the rule and the behavior of the listener, so they go together. A rule's function can only be identified in terms of its relationship to rule-governed behavior, and rule-governed behavior makes sense only as reference to a rule or a set of specified contingencies. The last concept that we're going to talk about is dimensions of rules and their related behavior. So, functional identification or classification among various types of rules and correspondence to rule-governed behavior has been limited. classification is made according to 4 dimensions, which are explicitness, accuracy, complexity, and source. So we're going to talk about each of those 4 dimensions. Explicitness of the rule. So explicit versus implicit rules. Rules can be distinguished based on completeness or specify of the contingencies expressed by the speaker. With an explicit rule, it clearly identifies the components of the entire contingency and its context. Such explicit rules incorporate all of the contingency components, comprehensively specifying identifiable contexts. For implicit rules, the contingencies may not gain verbal expression, either because some of the components are unnamed or because they are expressed in a way not identifiable in space and time. Accuracy of the rule. So we have accurate versus inaccurate rules. For an accurate rule, this specifies contingencies that, when followed, match certain event-consequence relationship in their environment. So hence, accurate rules specify contingencies that may occur. So if we were to say, if you keep looking away while you're speeding, you may have an accident. So that would be an accurate rule. Then we have inaccurate rules, and those describe contingencies that do not correspond to those encountered in the environment. So if we were to say, if you keep speeding, you're going to be rewarded by the police. We have complexity of the rule. A rule's lowest level of complexity specifies at least one dimension of a sample stimulus. So, for example, the instruction, name the colors of the figures appearing on the screen. That would specify only one dimension, where green, red, and blue are instances of the color dimension. Rules of higher level of complexity, however, involve a secondary or higher order class of relation. A second order response that involves abstracting a relation from other relations. So thus, a higher order relation includes a second order stimulus, control of rules, and associates one relation to other dimensions or to other relations. Lastly, we have sources of rules. These rules provided by others versus self-provided and self-generated rules. So rules provided by others, the speaker specifies implicitly or explicitly the criteria for the listener's behavior. In the case of self-provided rules, the speaker and the listener are the same individual. Self-provided rules can be taught by others.